Hey folks, I'm Congressman Rick Crawford, and in ag world we talk a lot about a lot of different things. A lot of topics come up, and food security and safety and a number of other issues, and invariably one thing that comes up as well, and that's the topic of veganism and the pluses and minuses, the virtues of veganism versus the virtues of omnivorous consumers. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. Thanks for joining us. Animals like cattle and hogs, chickens, turkeys, and so on, I mean, they have been domesticated over years and years and years, over thousands of years, to be a food source for us. We are omnivorous, as I said before, so we're going to have a demand for meat as our protein source. I'm an animal lover. I have pets in my house. I have chickens in my backyard. I've grown up with livestock. I've worked on cattle ranches. I've raised hogs and horses, sheep. I don't know that you'd find anybody that's more of an animal lover than me, my wife, and my kids. But I don't find anything even remotely approaching an unethical position to say that I would like to have a steak for dinner. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do think it's incumbent on us as human beings to make sure that we're treating animals humanely and respectfully. And if you're doing that, I think that there's really no problem with cultivating livestock for human consumption. Agriculture is a good environmental practice, and the term that I like to use to describe farmers is active environmentalist versus an environmental activist, because it's in their interest to make sure that they take care of the land because they're relying on the land to take care of them. If we're going to ramp up production of one particular commodity, we're going to have to cut into production of another. And then we have to decide, if we did away completely with the protein sector, I still don't think, we're still going to have to produce enough food to feed 300 plus million people, 350 million people. How are we going to do that? We're still going to require an awful lot of land, and we're still going to have to produce at economies of scale to make it affordable to the American people. So whatever it is, whether it be we're grazing cattle on range or on pasture land, whether we're growing produce in the Rio Grande Valley, whether we're growing cotton in the Delta or soybeans and corn in the Midwest, peanuts in the South, whatever it is, if we shift production, which we do from time to time, we're displacing other crops. Most of that's going to be market driven. Farmers are pretty responsive to the market factors, and when they decide I'm going to grow X, Y, or Z, usually that's as much about a market force as it is about what they're traditionally producing in a given region. Livestock, cattle, poultry, they do consume a lot of water. Hogs, obviously, just like we do, just like people. But there's a lot of water requirement for various crops as well. And so particularly if if you live in a dry climate and you have to rely on irrigation, for example, or if it's a dry year and you're not getting adequate rainfall, you're going to have to supplement that with irrigation. So it's hard to say from one year to the next. Generally speaking, I would think livestock consuming water would probably be greater than the water we use on crops. But rice is is an example of a pretty water-intensive crop, and so I think it's just going to vary, and it's going to have to be measured from year to year. And I think agriculture in general requires land and water. We put crops into the ground, and we use that ground over and over again, but it's in our interest to and farmers typically, and particularly today, are pretty sensitive to the agronomic practices that they employ on their farm. And that's the truth. Same thing with livestock. You have to rotate and make sure that your pastures or your rangeland has an opportunity to replenish itself. Otherwise, again, this gets back to my previous comment about farmers and ranchers taking care of the land because they want the land to help take care of them. If they're not employing their good practices, if they're overgrazing, then that is going to diminish their ability to produce a good product at the end of the day. And so what they're trying to do is to manage that land to its fullest effect, make sure that they're taking care of it, employing good conservation measures, good management, good range management, good pasture management, so that they have a sustainable food source.
All right, last question. Do cows butter?
Cows expel gas in a couple of different ways, mostly through eructation. So the digestive tract of a cow is not like a human being's. They eructate to further aid digestion. That means they kind of bring up a cud. You've heard the cud. That's called eructation. In the process of bringing that cud up, that's where the eructation comes out, and that is the gas, the emission that people like to say is causing the problem with the ozone and things like this. It's a naturally occurring phenomenon. Cows do it, buffalo do it, giraffes do it, goats do it, water buffalo, bison. They all eructate and chew a cud. Chewing the cud, it just helps the digestive process. So that's the reason for it. That's why they're ruminant animals, and they have that unique digestive aid, and that process is really what they're talking about.